Before you get comfortable, let me warn you. The stories you're about to hear didn't happen in haunted houses or abandoned hospitals. They happened in normal neighborhoods, quiet streets, one-story homes, places that look exactly like yours. Every story in this video is based on real, documented events, moments where nothing looked wrong, until it suddenly was. So if you're alone or listening late at night, you might want to check your doors, because sometimes the most disturbing things happen where you feel the safest.
I had spent a few days in Austin visiting friends. I live in Louisiana, so it's sort of an all-day drive. On my last day in Austin, my old friend Tom had commented on my Instagram story asking when I leave, and I said today. He told me he lived an hour outside of Austin, which was actually in the direction home for me. I hadn't seen Tom in years, and it would be nice to catch up. He said I should stop by, and I said sure, why not? I set my GPS for Tom's address, and it said about an hour-and-a-half drive. Tom and I had been friends back in high school, but lost touch after graduation. We followed each other on social media, but hadn't really spoken in years. When I pulled up, I noticed his house was a little old-fashioned. It wasn't run down or anything, just aged. The wooden porch creaked under my steps, and when he opened the door, I caught the scent of old wood and something rustic, like an old cabin in the woods. Tom was of course very welcoming, giving me a big hug and pulling me inside. Some friendships stay just as pure no matter how much time passes. The inside of the house was just as old as the outside. The furniture looked like it had been around since the 70s, and every step I took on the hardwood floors let out a small creak. It felt kind of Texas, I guess. It was kind of charming in a way, like stepping back in time. We sat down in his living room, catching up on life, drinking whiskey. It was like 5 p.m. by this point. One drink turned into two into three, and before I knew it, I was pretty drunk. The warmth of the alcohol made the room feel smaller, cozier, but also heavier. Hours passed like minutes, honestly. We were having such a good time catching up that eventually he dropped the question I knew he'd ask. "Hey man, you got a long drive back. Why don't you crash here for the night?" he offered. I hesitated, but he was right. I wasn't in any shape to be on the road. I said yeah, good idea, and asked if I'd take the couch we were on, and then he said nah, I got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's better than the couch. That was good enough for me. We ate some Chinese food that we had delivered, and after a while, he led me down a short hallway to the spare bedroom. I didn't pay much attention to the inside of the room because I was hammered. We both were. But I remember the air in the room was still, like the room hadn't been used in a long time. I barely had time to register my surroundings before I collapsed onto the bed, completely exhausted and drunk. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. My mouth was dry, my head was spinning, and the room was dark, except for a little bit of moonlight sneaking in through the blinds. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the room, on the closet door, there was something hanging. At first, it looked like a long black trench coat on a coat rack, but as my eyes adjusted, the shape of it felt wrong. It had a broad upper portion, almost like shoulders, and the way it hung made it look less like fabric and more like a silhouette. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't remember seeing that when I stumbled into the bed, but I had been drunk. Maybe I just hadn't noticed. I rolled over, trying to ignore it. It was just a coat, nothing more, but I couldn't help myself. I peeked again, still there. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and forced myself to sleep. I don't know how long I was out there before I woke up again. It wasn't just discomfort that pulled me from sleep. It was sound. A slow, soft creaking, like someone stepping carefully on an old wooden floor. My eyes shot open. The room was dimly lit now, dawn creeping through the blinds. I turned my head toward the corner, and my stomach dropped. The coat was gone. I sat up so fast that my head spun. My body was buzzing with a sickening mix of fear and leftover alcohol. I scanned the room, my heart thudding against my ribs. There was nothing in the corner, just an empty closet door. I threw the covers off and rushed to Tom's room. He was snoring, completely unaware of the panic storming through me. I shook him awake, which took a lot of effort considering he was out from all that alcohol. He finally woke up very confused, rubbing his eyes. "The coat," I said breathlessly. "The one on the coat rack in the spare room." He squinted at me, confused. "What coat?" he said. "The black trench coat, the one that was hanging on the closet door. It looked like a person almost." Tom sat up, looking more awake now. "I don't own a trench coat, man. I don't even have a coat rack in that room," he said. I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was messing with me, that this was some kind of joke, but his expression stayed serious. "Come look," I said. He sighed, but got up and followed me back to the spare bedroom. I pointed to the exact spot. "It was right there," I said. Tom scratched his head. He asked me if I was sure I wasn't just dreaming, but I said I know what I saw. I insisted, with my voice shaking slightly. "I woke up and it was there. Then I woke up again and it was gone," I said. We stood in the room for a few moments, both of us feeling the same eerie silence pressing in on us. Tom finally exhaled and shook his head, agreeing we should check the house just in case. We searched every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no weird coats hanging anywhere, nothing that could explain what I saw. Eventually, Tom tried to convince me that maybe I had been in some kind of half-dream state, seeing things that weren't there. I wanted to believe that, really. I didn't want to think about the alternative. As soon as the sun was fully up, I grabbed my stuff, said goodbye, and hit the road. I almost felt guilty leaving him alone after that. The whole drive back to Louisiana, my mind kept circling back to that moment, waking up to that coat-like figure staring at me from the corner, the way it was just gone in the morning. Maybe Tom played a cruel prank on me, but to this day he's never admitted to anything, so I doubt that. Or maybe, just maybe, there had been someone in that house watching me sleep, and they decided to leave before the morning came. This happened to me when I was 18 years old. I was on a trip with my parents and a friend of mine, whom we can call Anna. This story takes place in Sweden when we were on a road trip. My parents, Anna, and I were going on a domestic trip, and we had an 8-hour drive from home. The plan was to visit a theme park and stay at a campsite, but we hadn't booked one. The day came, and we arrived in the city where the theme park was located, but we planned to visit it the next day, so we needed a place to sleep. Since we had brought tents in our car, my dad searched online for a nearby campsite. He found one that seemed good and close by, so he called the campsite. Unfortunately, that day coincided with a big soccer tournament, and the campsite was fully booked. Since we hadn't reserved a spot in advance, there was no space left for us. My dad called around, but we couldn't find any campsites that were reasonably priced and near the theme park. Our only option was to find a camping spot in nature. We set the GPS to the nearest parking area in a forest to avoid parking fines. Eventually, we found a spot in a nature reserve. When we arrived, there were some people around, so we asked if it was okay to set up our tents there and whether it was a good place to stay. A woman who was hiking told us it was a good place to sleep and that there were no parking attendants. Based on that, we decided to sleep in a small, lonely gravel parking lot. We were surrounded by forest, and a 10-minute walk away was a beach. At first, we considered setting up our tents on the beach, but something told me it would be better to camp in the parking lot. As we got out of the car to set up our shelter for the night, I noticed a lone car parked further away in the lot. It looked like it was in bad condition, and there was no one inside. I found it strange because it was already evening, so there were no more people at the beach or hiking in the woods. However, I didn't think too much about it at the time. I helped my parents set up our tents. They were sleeping in one tent, while Anna and I shared the other, with both tents placed close together. After struggling to build them, we finally finished. Anna and I made our tent cozy, watched YouTube, and ate snacks. By this time, it was around 11 p.m. We wanted to sleep at a decent hour so we wouldn't be too tired the next day. After a while, around midnight, we decided to sleep. At this point, my parents were already asleep in their tent. Anna and I were scrolling through TikTok when we suddenly heard a metallic sound from the parking lot. It sounded like a shovel being thrown onto the gravel. We both jumped in fear and asked each other what it could be. Too scared to peek out of the tent window, we chose to stay silent and listen. The sound had come from the same direction as the abandoned car. We then heard what I assumed was a shovel being thrown into the car's trunk, followed by the trunk slamming shut. We sat in silence, our hearts pounding. Then we heard the car speed off as if someone were trying to get away quickly. I texted a friend from a nearby city, telling him where we were staying. He replied, warning me that the beach nearby was known to be dangerous, with organized criminals often engaging in illegal activities there. We had no idea about this before. When I read my friend's message, I felt cold and deeply unsettled. About 10 minutes passed in silence after the car sped away. Anna and I had started to calm down a little, when out of nowhere, we heard the loudest, most blood-curdling scream from a man coming from the woods. We were absolutely horrified. I immediately texted my mom, telling her we just heard a loud scream. When she didn't respond, I called her phone to wake her up. She finally answered and said neither she nor my dad heard anything. She reassured me that it was probably nothing serious, but at that moment, I couldn't think of any normal reason for someone to scream like that. Anna and I crawled under the blankets, terrified, not knowing what was happening. Every minute felt like an hour. Even though it was midnight, we were too scared to sleep. Suddenly, everything became eerily silent. Then, my blood ran cold. I heard footsteps. Someone was walking around our tents, moving stealthily. Anna and I sat up, frozen in fear. I put my phone down so that its light wouldn't illuminate the tent. My heart was racing and I could hear my own pulse. There was no logical reason for anyone to be walking around our tents in the middle of the forest at this hour. The footsteps moved around our tent first, then toward my parents' tent, and then circled around our car, which was parked nearby. The person stopped and seemed to be looking at our tents. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, I heard the same car from earlier returning. Its headlights lit up our tents, and Anna and I quickly laid down to avoid being seen. I gathered the courage to peek through the small tent window. I saw the car door slam shut before it sped off again. I felt a brief moment of relief when the person left. From my vantage point, I could see the road they had driven down. 5 minutes later, I saw another car approaching fast. It was a police car, racing in the same direction the other car had gone. Nothing else happened after that. Anna and I were still shaken, so we decided to sit in the locked car to feel safer. I stayed awake until around 5 a.m., keeping watch over the forest, while Anna eventually fell asleep beside me. After about an hour, we went back to our tent, and out of sheer exhaustion, finally fell asleep. We woke up around 9 a.m. completely drained. I told my mom everything that happened, and she revealed that she had also heard the footsteps, but when the person was near their tent, she had also heard heavy breathing, like the kind you hear in horror movies during a scary phone call. She had been terrified too. However, my dad had slept through the whole thing, so we had to tell him the story. Without hesitation, we immediately packed our things and the tents, eager to leave as soon as possible. None of us wanted to stay there any longer. Despite the terrifying night, we had a good time at the theme park later that day. However, that evening, I decided to research the forest where we had camped. What I found made my stomach drop. Just a short time before our visit, a man had been murdered there, stabbed to death due to gang-related debts. Even more disturbingly, 2 men had gone missing from that exact beach and had never been found. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if the person walking around our tents was a dangerous individual, checking to see if there were any witnesses? What if we had been in serious danger without realizing it? Even now, I still think about that night. Who made that horrifying scream, and why was someone using a shovel in the middle of the night in a forest? And the police, what exactly were they chasing? I guess I'll never know. This is a story that still haunts me when I think about it, even though I was so young when it happened. 6 is around the age where a lot of my childhood memories start to become more clear. I have one sibling, my older brother Keith. Keith is 2 years older than me, so at the time he was 8. When I was 6, I had a strict bedtime, 8:30. If I didn't abide by it, or our dad caught either of us up past our bedtime, we'd be in serious trouble. Our dad was always strict with us as kids. Honestly, I don't remember if this happened on a school night or not, but I woke up in the middle of the night to Keith shaking me awake. Keith and I shared a big bedroom upstairs in the house. My parents' room was on the first floor of the house. I was confused why Keith was waking me up until he told me in a whisper to be quiet and listen, and I did listen, and I heard what he was talking about. It was our mom's voice calling for us downstairs, but it was in a very quiet, whisperish type of voice. I was going to get up to go answer our mom, but my brother told me not to. He said that he didn't think it was Mom. I told him to stop trying to scare me. I remember being so mad at him. He told me to go closer and listen, so I got up and went towards the bedroom door. Right outside of our bedroom door was the little hall that led to the bathroom and another bedroom that our grandma would sleep in whenever she'd sleep over. Directly to the right, when you leave our bedroom, was the stairway downstairs, which had a door as well. I put my ear up on the bedroom door, and I heard the voice clearer. It sounded like our mom's voice, calling our names. Keith, Mikey. I said to Keith, "That's Mom," and he said, "No, it's not." Somehow, as a 6-year-old, and as the little brother, I found myself being the one confident enough to open our bedroom door and then listen through the stairway door. But now, the voice stopped. I whispered to Keith that Mom walked away, and again he said, "That's not Mom." I kept telling him to shut up and that he was scaring me. I unlocked the stairway door and slowly pulled it open to avoid making noise, and when the door was open just enough, I peered through the opening. At the bottom of the stairs was clear as day the silhouette of a person, a woman, but right away I knew it was not our mom. Whoever it was, she saw me because she said, "Hi sweetie, come down." Immediately I shut the door and locked it and went back into our bedroom and locked that door as well. I started to cry, and Keith kept saying, "I told you." We both agreed to start screaming as loud as we could on 3 to wake our parents. So on 3, we started stomping on the floor and screaming as loud as we could. It didn't take long for our parents to barge up the stairs pounding on the locked door. At first, our dad was pissed about the door being locked, but as soon as we let them in, they saw that I had been crying and we were genuinely disturbed about something. They listened to us. My mom was particularly concerned after telling us she was not at the bottom of the stairs and she was not calling our names. She asked what the woman looked like, but all we could say was we couldn't tell. Meanwhile, I remember our dad running downstairs to, I guess, look around for the woman. After a bit, our mom kissed us goodnight again, and I'm pretty sure she told us to lock the doors, which was a first. I was too young to catch on, but it seemed as if our parents knew exactly who it could have been. Keith and I looked out the window when we heard the doorbell after a while, and we saw a police car outside. We wanted to go downstairs, but we stayed put. I remember we begged our parents to tell us who it was and what happened, but our parents would always say they didn't know. They would also say they're proud of us for not going downstairs. Personally, I think they did know who it was, and to save my brother and I from any kind of further trauma or fear, they just never told us, because the last time I saw my parents for dinner, I asked them about it, and they still shrugged it off as some random intruder, but that never explained how that woman knew our names. This happened when I was 16. I was still in high school. I obviously didn't have a car yet, so I was at the mercy of my parents driving me around, or just walking if it was close. It was the weekend. My friend Haley was having some of our friends over since her parents weren't home. My mom drove me to her house. Haley lived close, about a 3-minute drive and 20-minute walk. My mom was single at the time, and she also liked to go out too, so she told me that if she's out late, then to just walk or get a ride home, which meant she was going on a date. A few of our girlfriends were at Haley's house, Tina, Courtney, and Belle. The 5 of us hung out in her backyard for a few hours until some boys from our school unexpectedly showed up. By unexpectedly, I mean Haley didn't tell me she was inviting them. The reason I was annoyed by this was because one of the boys that showed up was a boy I had some annoying history with and didn't really want to see. Haley thought she was being cute and sneaky by inviting him there against my knowledge, because she for some reason wanted him and I to work things out. It was just an awkward mess. There were 4 boys and 5 girls, including me, so eventually, I just decided I wasn't really feeling it. So, after a while, I left. I'm sure after I left that some of the others started to leave shortly after because it was already late, but I just didn't want to be around those boys. I made sure to let Haley know how pissed off I was over texts as I was walking home. and she kept saying, "OMG, come back." She apologized and I forgave her, but I still just wanted to go home. I walked for like 5 minutes until I slowed down. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, and when I slowed down, I confirmed I heard footsteps that weren't mine. I turned around, and there was a middle-aged man with a hood up over his head and his hands in his hoodie pocket. He was smiling, looking at me, and said, "How you doing?" I responded, "Hi," and just turned and kept walking. We were in the suburbs. People are walking around. It's not unheard of, even if it was late. 5 minutes more passed of me walking, and every time I'd glance around, that man would still be behind me, more or less the same distance away, maybe a little closer each time I looked. It was not a straight path home. I'd have to make multiple turns onto intersecting roads to get to my house, and each turn I made, he was still there. I was texting my friends about it, and then the man from behind me said, "Isn't it such a nice night? Love this weather." I replied back, "Yeah," and that was it. I started walking just a bit faster, but not enough to draw suspicion like that I'm running away. The man spoke again, and every time he opened his mouth, part of me died a little more inside. Like, why was he talking to me? Why was he following me? He asked, "Are you from the neighborhood?" I replied, "No." I was making my answer short and firm. The man chuckled. I started asking all my friends for help, to send one of the guys to come pick me up. Ironically, the boy who I was trying to avoid was on his way to come get me. I'll just nickname him Brandon. The man behind me then said something that changed everything. He said, "I'm not gonna hurt ya. You live by the elementary school, right?" I turned around, and he stopped in his tracks. He was still smiling, but now his smile seemed more disingenuous, more sinister. I screamed, "Leave me alone," and started to run. I heard the man running behind me, catching up to me. At that point, it was my life on the line, so I started screaming bloody murder. I started screaming, "Help me," for everyone in their houses to wake up and hear. The man dropped his nice guy facade and said, "Shut up, you little bitch." My screams definitely scared him off, because he obviously didn't want a bunch of witnesses about to come out of their houses. He ran away into the darkness, and I saw some lights in the houses around me turn on. One couple came out of their house, and I explained I almost got kidnapped. I stayed there in front of their house until Brandon arrived to pick me up. He drove me home. It was only like a 1-minute drive after that. My mom wasn't home, she was out, and she wasn't answering my texts. I didn't want to be alone, so I invited Brandon in to stay the night. I know he was the happiest camper alive, but it didn't end there. We were up late just talking and reminiscing about old times when we both heard footsteps circling the house. My room in that house was upstairs facing the backyard. We heard the gate to the backyard opening. My mom would never enter through the backyard, so something was off. I held back from yelling out, "Mom," and instead, Brandon and I just looked out the window, watching. We didn't hear any more sounds. We were expecting to see someone walking around the yard, but instead, we both heard a man's voice say, "I see you up there." I let out a very audible gasp and I stepped away from the window. Brandon yelled out something along the lines of, "We're calling the cops, you pussy freak." That's exactly what we did. The fact that this man knew where I lived, he probably knew who I was. What if he knew I was going to Haley's house? Brandon did a lot of the talking on the phone with 911. Looking back, I know he tried really hard to be the man in the situation, and I appreciated that. I was honestly so happy he came inside. The cops showed up, and their presence just made me feel safer. Even just giving them a description of this man made me feel better, like at least something was done. My mom got home soon after, and she was just as freaked out as I was. They kept a police car parked on the block for a few hours as a deterrent, thankfully. From there on, I didn't do any walking at night. I was even scared to go into our backyard after that. My mom had to have our uncle come over and install an entire security camera system. He made no effort in hiding them. They were on full display to deter that creepy man and any other creep from coming to that house. I'm glad to say that the story ended there, because this incident also prompted my mom to sell that house about a year later, just because she hated seeing me living in constant fear in that house. We never found out who that man was. We moved into my grandparents' house in 2016 when they decided to downsize. I was 9. They had built the place in the early 90s, and it sits on 5 acres out on the outskirts of a small southern town. Woods and open fields stretch around it, and a slow, muddy river winds past our southern fence line. On 2 sides, our property touches our only neighbor's land, an odd, crooked patch of acreage with a house that felt like it was sinking into the ground. That house was old. The original farmhouse had been built in the 1920s, and over the years, it had been added onto in all the wrong ways, like someone stapled extra rooms together without a plan. The siding was discolored and soft-looking. Every time you glanced at it, it just looked wet, even on dry days. The yard was a nightmare. Overgrown bushes tangled with vines, broken fountains surrounded by weeds, gnomes missing heads, and old trash that looked like it had been there for years. Grocery bags flapped in the tree branches. A rusted lawnmower sat in the middle of the grass like it had died mid-job and was never moved. It was the place that made you want to hold your breath when you walked by. At the time, the house was home to 2 elderly sisters, Violet and Agnes, and 3 kids. Violet was the quieter of the 2, always sitting on the porch in a faded green rocking chair, just watching the trees. Agnes was sharper and more active, but she still moved like her bones hurt. Both women were in their 70s at least. The kids were their grandchildren. The boy, Liam, was my age and in my grade at school. The other 2 were girls named Allison and Kelsey. They were the same age as my younger sister. Liam was weird. I didn't like him, and I didn't want to hang out with him. But we were in the same class, so we got lumped together a lot. He took that as permission to just show up at my house whenever he wanted. No knocking or texting. I'd be playing a game in my room and turn around and he'd just be there. One time, I looked out my window and saw him doing cannonballs in our pool. Another time, he walked straight into the kitchen, opened our fridge, and started eating a slice of leftover pizza with his hands like it was no big deal. When we hung out, he wasn't fun. He was obsessed with anime, like really obsessed, but I didn't watch any, so I had no idea what he was talking about. He'd say weird lines in Japanese and get mad when I didn't laugh. Sometimes he'd get this look in his eyes, like he was imagining something violent. One time he chased me with a pair of sharp garden shears, swinging them around and laughing like it was a game. Another time we were on an old wooden bridge that crosses the creek near the back of our properties, and I swear he tried to push me in. He claimed it was a joke, but the way he smiled after, I knew he meant it. The twins were different, quiet and almost invisible. Their clothes were always dirty, and they had speech impediments that made it hard to understand them. It was obvious nobody at home was helping them. Their voices were garbled, like they were still toddlers, even though they were 7. They flinched easily, and they always looked hungry. Their dad was in and out of jail, so he wasn't around. And that brings us to the mom, Teresa. The first time I saw her, she was trying to hook a hose up to the spigot at the edge of their property, right near our side yard. She was tall, way taller than anyone else in her family, and heavy set, with long, thick, curly black hair and glasses that looked like they belonged in the 80s. She was different, put together in a way that the rest of the family wasn't. Her clothes were clean. Her hair was always styled, too. She smiled at me like she'd been waiting for me to come over. She asked me if I could help her with the faucet, and said it was stuck. I walked over and turned it, and it moved easily. She gasped and clapped her hands, told me I was so strong and how lucky she was I came over. I felt proud. She made me feel like I was something special. Then she said, "Did you know you have a third eye?" I blinked. What? She smiled wider and said we all have one. Not a physical eye, but a spiritual one. She said it lets you see the truth, whatever that meant. Before I could ask anything, she started walking back toward her house and told me to come with her, so I did. The inside of their house hit me like a wave of rot. It smelled like spoiled food, mildew, and something worse I couldn't place. Trash was everywhere. Garbage bags torn open, rotting food on plates, stained furniture, even dirty diapers were stuffed behind the couch. I tried to leave, but Teresa grabbed my wrist and led me upstairs. Her room was nothing like the rest of the house. It was pristine, with pink wallpaper, clean carpet, shelves full of porcelain dolls, and very ornate old furniture. The air smelled like rosewater and old perfume. It was like I stepped into a different building. She gestured for me to sit on a little cushioned stool in the corner, and then walked over to her vanity and opened a drawer. She pulled out a silver tray with a black candle, a crystal, and a thick, leather-bound book. The second I saw the pentagram on the cover, my stomach turned. My parents are Catholic. I knew what that symbol meant. And suddenly, I started seeing it everywhere. On the jewelry box, on the mirror's frame, and peeking out from under the corner of the rug on the floor, etched into the wood. I jumped up. "Sorry, my mom wants me home. Bye." I didn't wait for a response. I ran. In 2019, Agnes had a heart attack and died inside the house. I heard she collapsed in the living room in front of all of the kids. I went to the funeral. It was in this rundown Baptist church on the edge of town. The family was stone-faced, like they didn't know how to react, except for one woman who I'd never seen before. She sat in the second pew, sobbing so loud it echoed. Nobody acknowledged her. That same year, Liam disappeared. The story was that he tried to kill one of the twins and was sent to a psychiatric facility. I never got the full details, but my parents sat my sister and I down that night and said, in no uncertain terms, we were never to go near that family again. I remember their faces, grim and serious. That's when it all clicked. All the little things I hadn't understood. The weird stuff, the fear. Eventually, the rest of the family moved away. They left Violet behind, just an old, frail woman living alone in that collapsing house. She passed away in 2020, alone, in that house. Her estate went up for auction. A few months later, one of my old elementary school teachers, Mrs. S., bought it with her husband. They tore down most of the structure, but kept the original 1920 section, the same part where Teresa's room had been. Mrs. S. invited us over to see the renovations. It was beautiful. Open floor plan, all new appliances, and fresh paint. She showed us upstairs, and that's when my skin started crawling. We were in her room, and I could feel it. Even though the floors were carpeted now, I knew the pentagram was still there, like the floor remembered. I felt nauseous, like something was watching me from the walls. I told Mrs. S. I had a headache and had to go. She was disappointed. I was supposed to stay for dinner. I avoided the house after that, until last year. Mrs. S. asked me to dog sit while they went out of town for a week. I said yes. I figured it was just a job. Easy money. Every night I'd ring the doorbell and they'd buzz me in through the smart lock. Their dogs, a Shih Tzu named Muffin and a snorting little pug named Henry, would greet me tails wagging. The first 4 nights were quiet, peaceful even. I'd feed the dogs, play with them a bit, turn on the porch light, and lock up. But on the last night, I was about to leave when Henry started barking at the staircase. He planted his little legs and just barked over and over. Muffin backed away, whimpering. There was nothing there. And then, thump. It came from upstairs. Another thump, louder this time. I didn't stay to investigate. I ran to the front door, slammed it behind me, and locked it. The whole walk home, I couldn't shake the feeling something had followed me. Now it's 2025. We hadn't heard a word about the family in over 4 years. That is, until recently. A girl from school told me she saw Teresa at a farmer's market in a nearby town. Apparently, she started some kind of religious group, calls herself a truth seer. They live in a mobile home community far out in the woods. Flyers have started popping up on bulletin boards and telephone poles. I don't trust it. I don't trust her. I think Teresa is truly evil. I mean, she neglected her kids. She left her mother in that house to rot. And I think she brought something into it. Something dark. Something that stayed behind. I still have nightmares of her and Liam. They stand at the foot of my bed, staring at me, not speaking at all. And every time I pass by that house, even now, I get chills. The good parts, such as the paint, the furniture, it's all surface level. That place remembers, and I don't think it ever let go of what happened there. My name is Keegan. I reside in Michigan with my parents. High school was a decent timeline for me, as I had gotten to meet various new people during my time there. Obviously, I also had some people I tended to hang out with outside of school. The only time I really hung out with them was at places like my local community center, where we would work out and play basketball. Back in freshman year, it was getting close to the end of the year, and I was excited for summer break to be coming. I would be starting driver's training, and even start doing a side job to at least begin making money, so I didn't have the fastest start. I had this one friend named Clayton. I would usually hang out with him at least once a week. He was a grade lower than me, his final year of junior high. We were to some extent good friends, and my dad and I even took him to a Detroit Pistons basketball game at one point. He was quite a big basketball fan, so he was more than eager to attend his first game. Despite all the fun activities in the past, it was until I started becoming more busy that he was somewhat beginning to change. He would usually get a bit sad or angry because I'm not free on a specific day. He was the kind of person to have some pretty intense anger issues when he got pissed off enough. I remember this one day when I told him I wasn't free again and that I would be home cleaning. It seemed as if he would find the right days where I'm not available to hang out. I didn't check my phone until after I finished cleaning, and I found out that he removed me on Snapchat. I messaged him on Messenger, asking why he got so mad and why he decided to remove me as a friend. He assumed I was lying to avoid hanging out with him. That thought crossed my mind for a while, and I even followed up with it at times because he was starting to become more obnoxious. On occasion, I would lie and say I'm doing something, going somewhere, or already made plans with another friend. He felt so left out that one day, when the sun had set, he showed up to my apartment I was living in at the time unannounced. I asked him why he didn't text me ahead of time. Nothing. He just stared at me for a few seconds before walking away slowly. Why was he here at this hour? Why didn't he say anything? Why did he just give me this 1,000-yard stare as if I did something to offend him? I hadn't spoken to him the next day. That's also when I turned off my Snap Map on Snapchat to hide my location from him, after he apparently added me back. Some time had gone by, about a month, and he's still the same person, angry or sad when I can't pay him a visit. That's when I got a text from my friend, Nick, who I barely saw in person. He knows Clayton and his ex-girlfriend. Nick had told me some gruesome things about him and what he's done, but my heart dropped as I heard from him and Clayton's ex that he held a knife at his ex-girlfriend's throat and sexually assaulted her. I knew that he was a psycho right then and there. I removed him as a friend on all platforms without any hesitation. He texted me on Instagram before I removed him on there too. He blew up my phone with messages asking why I'm removing him. I just told him I needed some time to myself and I would add him back when I'm better, but I used that as an excuse to get away from him. That night, while I was home alone since my parents went to the next town over for dinner with some old friends of theirs, I heard a knock at my apartment door. I looked out of the peephole and no one was there. I opened the door a crack to survey the hallway, but no one. I figured it was someone ding-dong ditching. I figured they wouldn't come back. But when I randomly looked out my bedroom window, the light was burned out by the sidewalk. I noticed a small flash in the corner of my eye, and I thought it was from inside someone's car, but I felt my stomach drop when I saw a tall figure standing in front of my window. It was him. I opened my window and told him to go away and that I don't want him here. He told me to let him in so he could tell me something. I firmly said no and told him I want him gone, but when he began to move around a bit, I noticed something was in his hand. I couldn't exactly make out what he was holding until he held it up, and when I tell you I was frightened, I felt as if I was going to pass out. Because I shit you not, Clayton was holding a knife in his hand. I told him I was calling the police, but he had already taken off by the time the police had gotten there. I gave the best description of him that I could describe to the cops. I haven't heard a word about or from him since that horrific night. I honestly wouldn't be so surprised if you were trying to kill me while I was home alone. I believe he had murderous intentions. I assumed he probably ended up in juvie after what happened. Not only was I horrified from that experience, but it may have been one of the most traumatic moments of my life. Having your parents gone along with it makes it feel undeniably more unsettling. I'm glad I disconnected all contact from him when I did, because I think if I continued to remain friends with him, I probably could have ended up as one of his endless punching bags, or even worse, dead. This happened in late 2022, when I went on what I thought would be a fun and simple first date with someone I matched with on a dating app. Her name was Emily, and we had been texting for about 2 weeks before deciding to meet up. We both shared a love for horror movies, and when Smile came out, we agreed that seeing it together would be the perfect first date. We picked a weekday night, Thursday. It was a late showing, 10:15 p.m., and at a small, older theater just outside of town. I offered to drive and picked her up around 9:30. She seemed normal, friendly, maybe a little shy. She was quiet for most of the drive, but opened up once we started talking about horror movies we liked growing up. When we got there, the parking lot was almost empty. I joked about how this theater looked like something out of a horror movie itself. Dim lights, flickering neon, and not a single person in the lobby when we walked in. There was only one guy working at the concession counter, and when I asked if it was going to be a full theater, he laughed and said we were the only ones who had bought tickets for that showing. At first, I thought that was great, no crowds, just me, her, and the movie. We went into Theater 6 and chose seats right in the center, about 4 rows from the back. It was freezing in there, which Emily pointed out right away. I offered her my hoodie, and we laughed about how creepy it felt being the only ones in the entire room. We sat back and talked while waiting for the previews to start. I was starting to feel a little chemistry between us, and I figured this would be one of those dates where you actually end up seeing the person again. Then, right before the movie started, like right after the last trailer and just as the lights dimmed lower, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. Someone walked into the theater. They didn't say anything or stop to look around or check their phone for seat numbers like most people do. They walked in slow, straight up the steps and sat directly behind us. I mean, directly. There were maybe 100 open seats, but he chose the one right behind me. Emily turned to look at him too, and she gave me a weird glance like, really? I kind of chuckled and said under my breath, figures. But right away something felt off. You know that feeling when someone's eyes are burning into the back of your head? That's what it felt like. I glanced back after a minute or two. He wasn't watching the screen. He was staring at us. I only saw him for a split second, but he didn't flinch or look away. He didn't even pretend to be interested in the movie. He was just sitting forward a bit, like someone might do if they were really into a scene, but his face wasn't even turned toward the screen. It was angled right at us. At me. I whispered to Emily, "He's just staring." She nodded slowly and whispered back, "I know." We tried to ignore it for a while. The movie started, and I really did try to get into it, but every few minutes, I'd feel it again. The presence behind us. Not just someone being annoying, this was different. There was an intensity to it, like he was waiting for something. After about 20 minutes, I leaned forward in my seat and turned my head a little so I could glance back more casually. Same thing. He was still staring. He was middle-aged, maybe late 40s. He was clean-shaven, kind of pale, wearing a dark gray hoodie. Something about him just looked empty, like he wasn't even there mentally. His eyes didn't look glazed over like someone who was zoning out. From what I saw, he never blinked. I turned back around and whispered to Emily, "This guy is really creeping me out." She looked genuinely scared now. "Do you want to move?" We considered it, but where would we go? It would still be in the same room, and we were already in the best seats. Moving might make it awkward or even provoke him. A few minutes later, I felt something. The guy breathed on me. Not loud or exaggerated. It was soft, but unmistakable. A deep, slow exhale right behind my seat. I spun around, and he was leaning forward over the back of my seat, his face closer than it should have been. I stared at him and said, "Dude, can you not?" He didn't respond. He just slowly leaned back in his seat. That was it. I told Emily, "Let's move." We got up and walked down to the front corner row. It sucked and the angle was bad, but we needed distance. I could barely focus on the movie anymore, just kept glancing back every couple of minutes, and every time I looked back there, he was staring straight at us. He didn't budge. Around halfway through the movie, we heard footsteps. He was coming down the steps. Emily grabbed my arm and we both held still. The footsteps stopped a few rows above us. We didn't turn around. I don't know how long he stood there. I didn't dare look. Then, finally, he He walked back up to the top row. I whispered, "We need to leave." She nodded. We grabbed our stuff and slipped out quietly. As we exited the theater and went down the hallway toward the lobby, I glanced back through the glass window in the theater door. He was standing in the aisle now. He wasn't watching the screen. He was just standing there, still staring at us. We went straight to the front and told the concession guy that someone was acting really weird in Theater 6. His smile faded instantly, and he said, "Again?" "What do you mean, again?" I said. And he hesitated, then said, "He's been coming in randomly for like a month. Always late shows and never buys anything. You guys aren't the first ones to complain about him." I responded, "Why hasn't anyone kicked him out?" He looked uncomfortable. He said, "He doesn't technically do anything illegal. Management says unless he touches someone or breaks a rule, we can't really do much." Emily was almost in tears. She asked if someone could walk us to our car. He agreed, and one of the janitors walked us out. The guy didn't follow us that night, at least not that we saw, but the whole ride back, I couldn't shake this fear that he might have written down my license plate, that he might have followed us at a distance, watched us leave, and found out where Emily lived when I dropped her off. For weeks afterward, I was paranoid. My cop friend also told me it was a load of horseshit that they couldn't do anything about him. The theater as a business would reserve every right to kick somebody out. I avoided that side of town for a while. Emily and I talked a few times after that, but never ended up seeing each other again, unfortunately. I think we were both too shaken from what happened. I have not been back to that theater since, though I don't see any reviews on the website about the guy. I wonder just how many people have actually had the same experience.